We're live. We are live. There we go. It says it on
We,
the screen. We are live. You are
yeah,
live.
we're live.
Excellent. Let's just jump straight into it. You probably already see from the title of this, and if you clicked watch, whether you're watching the recording or watching live, we are two former WordPress developers that are now Sanity developer education people. Yeah, it's on my shirt as well. It's in very fine print, though. But yes, we're now at Sanity. But I suppose the conceit for today's video that I wanted to put together, obviously, there's been so much already said about the current situation that is with WordPress. But I felt really moved the other day after receiving a message from a friend of mine who I used to build WordPress websites with, that he's in a group of people, a group chat there where people aren't sure what to do next in the situation they're in. And I have great sympathy for people in that situation because I got to get out under my own terms. I know that sounds very cultish, and I don't mean it to sound that way, but I owe a lot of my career to WordPress, but I moved on several years ago before all of this went down. And Knut, you posted like a really great article there on LinkedIn and Twitter there the other day with a very similar story. So do you want to introduce yourself and sort of your background with WordPress? And that hopefully should set the stage as people that know WordPress and before we go on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I started my web development career fairly young. I was like 14 or something. It wasn't even the 2000. Now I feel old. And then like hand wrote HTML and CSS for a bit, and then I think it was 2004 or something. I came upon like this WordPress thing, and I had to figure out how to install a database and mess around with the htaccess files and stuff. And I kind of managed to do that, and then suddenly I had like this super powerful tool that let me just kind of like push content from the browser, basically. And that felt like a serious superpower, having come from like the front page handwritten HTML kind of world, right? And not even that, like I could also give this to people who didn't know how to code and enable them to push content on the web. Hence, kind of like kickstarting my career as like a paid web developer, I guess, or not very well paid because I haven't figured out how to actually take money for this stuff yet. But yeah, so and I grew alongside WordPress, I guess. Learned about data structures and PHP and all of this. So yeah, it's kind of very close to the core, even though, as you did, I kind of moved on from it 7 years ago or something.
Yeah. No, I'm much the same. I was handwriting a lot of HTML to create websites, but WordPress really was the thing that, like you said, like it powered a website. It was like, actually, this is a really dynamic thing. And while I was editing files directly on FTP and hitting save, because I didn't know what a local development environment was. For the longest time, actually, I didn't write JavaScript until I started using Sanity. Literally, like even jQuery, I'm like, if I couldn't copy and paste a working example of like Slick Slider out of a Stack Overflow post, I just wouldn't write JavaScript. I actually like outsourced JavaScript for the longest time because that felt too confusing. But WordPress was something that just made all that magic happen all by itself.
Also, I learned to debug.
Through WordPress. Yes, I mean WordPress will teach you what to do with the blank screen of death and how many times you Googled what a 500 error is and all of that. But then, yes, I mean, both of us got out at some point. So, like, and this is my recommendation and has been for people who were still like using WordPress is, I was using Text Pattern before I was using WordPress, so I thought I'd share that one there. But Roots, this is a stack that I really liked to get me out of. Actually, still using WordPress, but this was something that opened my eyes to the broader web development ecosystem because they brought in Composer and they brought in Laravel Blade templates and they brought in, in the version of Sage I was using at the time, I think it was still Gulp or Grunt or one of these, but I had no idea what NPM was or the terminal. And so actually the learning how to use this Sage theme was what opened my eyes to modern web development. And so I owe a lot to this stack as well, having used it for a number of years to like, this felt like I was taking WordPress sites to becoming actually a real web developer, but still building WordPress websites myself. But it was that exposure to like the modern web dev ecosystem that then had me look at things other than WordPress. I'm not sure what was the impetus to get you off-boarded from WordPress.
I think I started as like a technology person in an agency in 2005 or something, and we had a lot of different clients who used a lot of different CMSs, from like the heavy on-prem enterprise stuff to the really lightweight stuff. But this agency also specialized in kind of like content strategy and content-driven web development.
Mm.
And you can kind of like force WordPress to do a lot of that stuff, like with structured content and so on, but it wasn't like a neat fit. And it was fairly heavy as a system to kind of like maintain and so on. So I actually got caught on to two things, like Statamic, because we didn't need a database back then, at least. It was flat files for better or worse. And then Craft CMS, which is like a really excellent, almost like boutique PHP CMS. But
I never used it, but everybody speaks very glowingly of
yeah,
Craft.
but like it came like with less assumptions about the content model, so you could like do structured content in it, and it was like very slick and very high quality. And that was like my gateway to eventually Sanity, and out of PHP development as well. And then in this agency, we had like a lot of, I guess, JavaScript developer, front-end developers. So I got to learn React and the modern JavaScript, like ES5 stuff and so on, and got really hooked when it clicked, kind of. So that was like my springboard out of that WordPress developer identity, I guess.
Yeah. I think I got forcibly ejected. The agency I was working at the time got new management, and the new manager came in and said, "I hate WordPress. Go and find something else." And so I studied the headless CMS landscape and found Sanity. And 2 years later, I left that agency and joined Sanity. So. Sorry, but I'm very happy with that decision. But I think also too, and I think we both share this in common, is that the whole structured content side of things only started to make sense in WordPress once you found advanced custom fields. I know I tried WordPress a number of times, and it didn't give me enough, because actually in text pattern, which I used to use, it had two reserved slots for custom fields, and so I'd have to be very deliberate in the choices that I'd make for like a limited number of meta fields. And then when I found advanced custom fields, I'm like, actually, I can use this because I can define as many meta fields as I like. And being able to write that in code, especially because you can write that as PHP, and there's great libraries around like writing it in real shorthand to create those fields and have those version controlled as code. So then finding Sanity as just it's just like if advanced custom fields and custom post types written as code was the whole CMS, and I never have to touch a database again. That was like I was sold from that point forward. So I think advanced custom fields makes WordPress like a useful CMS at some point.
Yeah, like we said on top of this, or before we went live, like we shouldn't gloat, but like it's hard to secure custom fields now. Yeah, it's so bad. But anyways, yeah, and I think like this agency thing also like a lot of our projects was kind of like, oh, we want to redesign our whole like website and brand and so on, or we want to kind of like modernize our platforms. And that's where you also really, really feel the pain of how WordPress approaches kind of like this pretty tight coupling between content and presentation, because it's so much just labor to get the actual content out of kind of like all the assumptions of the specific design. So yeah, like a lot of hacky scripting and whatever, like Cheerio stuff, like just to kind of like pick out the things, and and like it's just a waste of time and money for something that's kind of solved when it comes to structured content. So yeah, that also kind of like got me like out of that WordPress,
I think,
like fandom a little bit.
Yeah, and to me, Gutenberg was like the final nail in the coffin, because that was like so then divorced from advanced custom fields, or from meta fields, sorry. And then when advanced custom fields supported it, it's like, well, I was using those slots for independent, meaningful bits of data. I wasn't using those slots to define a column block or something. I got out as that was being forced and popular. And actually, again, not gloating, but I remember Matt said everyone should learn JavaScript deeply, right? And so like at that time I did. when I learned Sanity and React and started building websites on Gatsby. So I think that was perhaps not the intention of the push to go and learn JavaScript, but certainly there's like a whole wide world of development outside. And
yeah, and with like around like the mid 2000s, we also start to see other approaches like frameworks like Next.js and Next and kind of like these kind of like decoupled website frameworks where you could just put any API on them and generate all the routes and stuff that you needed. And there was like a huge impetus to kind of like learn those things and adopt these things. And then, of course, headless CMSs and so on were a better fit. It seemed like so that also drove this kind of like transition, I guess.
Yeah, and the speed at which you could iterate as well. Like I very clearly remember my first like non-WordPress site. I built a site for like a gym education platform in Gridsome, which was the Vue version of Gatsby at the time, and like static sites were so hot. And then I remember, taking, I think it was the Sanity blog template, and I just brute forced that thing into a real estate website. But like even having no understanding of what I was doing, because I'd never written JSX or React or anything before, but I could still force that into existence. And you end up learning a wider array of skills. And this is, I hope it's not too generalized of an idea, but my thought is that because this was my experience, I had very proprietary skills when I knew how to build WordPress websites. I could build a functioning website if it was a WordPress website, because I knew which plugins to build or to buy, or to install, and which ones not to update, and to know to like disable plugin updates in production. Like I knew all of those things, but those are very WordPress specific concerns. But then as soon as you step outside of that, you do learn, I'm going to try Gridsome, I'm going to try Next, I'm going to try Gatsby, I'm going to try Nuxt. And it's not a huge shift mentally to go and try a few different things and see how it works. And I find makes you a more malleable developer with a wider range of skills outside of the WordPress ecosystem.
So listening to talk now kind of like invokes these memories, and I realized it wasn't before I started kind of like doing web development without WordPress where I kind of like started to use Git and like Git deploys and all of those things more seriously. Heroku came out with this 12-factor app manifest at this time. So like shifting this kind of like mental model of how modern web development should work was kind of like just converging around this time. And I feel like much better for it. I feel like I'm a much more mature web developer, to be honest.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like I've got enough skills now where I think I said it in a video recently. I could use one of our competitors and be able to build an app very easily. I could build an app that only uses a database and doesn't use a content management system. I feel confident I could do that, where beforehand when you're building with WordPress, if I got asked to build an app or something, I'd think, well, how can I build that with WordPress? Because it can be like brute forced into any number of things. But I think it's a benefit of one of the benefits of getting out is that you'll actually be able to take on ambitious projects of many different types. You don't have to find just what's the one thing to get me out of WordPress, or what's the most WordPress-like thing out there. You can find what really fits for you. And the mental model for Sanity certainly fit me best for WordPress, but just the experience of using that application widens the skills to be able to use many different application types.
And like, I feel also we should address this, because if you venture into the whole JavaScript ecosystem and the discourse, you will often hear, oh, there's like a new JavaScript framework that comes out every week. And it's kind of true, but what's implied isn't true, because you don't have to learn or like use that JavaScript framework, right? There are some kind of like usual suspects that you can learn and kind of like assume that skill will be very useful and productive for you. Like aforementioned Next has been around for almost 10 years. There are others like React routers, that's Remix, and so on. Like you can safely adopt those things and have like a huge ecosystem and community, and kind of like trust that these skills will be useful also going into the next decade. Well,
soon we don't have to have skills, right? Because AI, but yeah, you know.
Yeah, that's right. AI would rewrite that app anyway. But yeah, you are learning at least transferable skills. Like it's not an automated thing to go from Next to Remix or from Remix to Next, but you're using React, using JSX in both. So it would be possible to brute force that migration across where, yeah, WordPress to X is a much more complicated conversation to have.
And but yeah, let's have the conversation though.
Well, I mean, so what was it then about Sanity that you settled on, like with all of the array of options? What was it for you? For me, it was like ACF and CPT in one with no database. What was it specifically for you?
Yeah, it was like I was already warmed up to this kind of like idea that to make a web experience, you should start with content and you should structure this content in a way that kind of like mapped to how the business or organization was thinking. So like if you were a consultancy, you had like consultants, you had services, you had a like portfolio of projects and so on, and those should be entities in the CMS. You shouldn't kind of like have to do a mental switch. Oh, what pages are the services pages?
Or what template does the person have? Yeah.
And when you switch this mental model, you also could see that, oh, I can do more with this content. I can make like nifty Slack integrations and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
And also I can like use the same content in different ways throughout the web experience. Like every content team we talk to as an agency, like, oh, we just want to bring usable content. We don't want to copy paste the same thing all over again everywhere. So I was kind of like warmed up to this idea. I used Craft CMS in this way. And then in early 2017, the founders of Sanity came around. They were kind of like renowned in Norway, where I lived at back then. And like, hey, do you want to try this beta of this new CMS? And interestingly, I had already started to build a new agency website in another headless CMS that starts with con and ends with full.
Another one I've never used, I can proudly say.
Yeah, but I got the beta, and over a weekend, I had just reproduced everything that I had did in that CMS, and I got this profound feeling. Oh, like shoot, someone actually thought about this. There was this kind of like feeling of craft and like some novel ideas, but like like this is probably how it should be. So I want to bet on this horse. So I started to use it for client projects and so on, and it went pretty successfully. So half a year later, I joined the company, I guess.
Yeah.
So still here. Yeah.
I always assumed it was like this very mature product. I can't quite believe still when I joined it. Like, what do you mean there's only like less than 50 people here? I thought it was this like really refined, huge industry leading Sanity, this thing in the content space, which of course we are. But I was always amazed at the amount of work that was able to be produced by such a small team, that it was comparable and production ready to what I'd already been doing in WordPress. But like you talk about the speed of development as well. I guess one of my concerns is, and one of the big selling points of WordPress is the plugin ecosystem, right? Is that you can install a plugin for anything. And there's a version of that that's true. You also do have to install 3 or 4 plugins to find the one you hate the least and then keep it updated. But something I really, really liked about WordPress is that I was able to recreate a lot of my favorite plugins very quickly, just because the speed of development. So one in particular was like WP Migrate DB Pro, to be able to move content between databases. I'm like, I need that in Sanity, and so I created the cross dataset duplicator. But I made that plugin in like 2 days, the first version of that. So like, and that was a premium plugin. I paid like $120 a year or something for that plugin in WordPress. But to be able to recreate those things so quickly, just the speed of development that you get in JavaScript ecosystem and with a cloud-hosted data set instead of your own MySQL database. I guess that was one of the things that allayed my fears very early, was that the things that I was missing, I knew I could recreate incredibly quickly.
Yeah, and to that point, it's like, because Sanity was very like, it only was concerned about kind of like the content model, the data kind of, but also the editing interface. And it made it really easy to also kind of like set up those guardrails that you want for content teams, like custom validation rules and all of those things. Eventually, we got like conditional fields. So you can make like a really tailored and optimized editing interface. Especially in this agency context where I work pretty closely with these content teams, I can just see how they were empowered. And they didn't have to kind of like learn the system as much as kind of like, we can have a conversation like, how would you like this to work? What would make sense? And then we just did that, right? So I felt I got kind of like a tool instead of having to kind of like force people into a way of working and a way of thinking.
That's right. Yeah, less learning the system and more just using the one that was built for them. Definitely. Yeah, and as sort of that mental model shift too of like WordPress. So I was like, how many things can I strip out until like there's nothing else left? So we remove all the buttons off the screen. And I think there's there's a plugin I used to install that like it was the specific role of this plugin was like strip things out of the UI. Where Sanity, you're only putting in the things that you need. So because it only has concerns of the data that you're actually using.
Yeah, I remember like those blog posts that floated around, like how to kind of like make the WordPress dashboard kind of like client safe, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And like, again, it's like it's really hard to like not seem like you're gloating, but like these were like in fact kind of like challenges you got when you try to use WordPress in a more mature sense. And like, of course, there's obviously a lot of people who are able to use WordPress in a very mature sense and so on. But we're here to kind of like say, there are more stuff out there to that's worth looking up.
And that mature sense, like, because that's the reality of like enterprise grade WordPress, or like anything beyond a blog, which is a lot of WordPress sites, is that a lot of the discourse that I've seen out there about WordPress is, just migrate. And that word just is doing so much heavy lifting because every person's WordPress install is different. And I think there's an idea some have, it's just pages and posts, categories and tags, but it's not. Like that's what you started with, but everybody spawned a billion other meta fields and custom post types and all of those things because that's what you needed to do for your WordPress site to work in a modern context for a business. So it's too easy to say, just migrate out. There's actually some difficulty getting that content out because everybody customized into its own thing, but it's still within a locked down system.
And this is kind of like what kind of concerns me a little bit, or kind of like confronts me when I look at what like Automatic is saying and kind of like how they're thinking about their product is like, it's like we have an open source specification for WordPress exports, right? Like it's like everything is open and portable. But what they forget is a lot of WordPress installations is like the WordPress app, and then there's like the very custom PHP app that kind of lives outside of it, right?
Yeah.
Through plugins, but also just like custom code. There was like so much custom code you just brought outside of WordPress, and the WordPress API is kind of fairly simple, for better or worse. There's not that much to it, but like whatever you can do in PHP, right? You probably will. And they kind of forget that reality a little bit. It seems like. And this is like what's impressive with WordPress is this backward compatibility. Like the data structure in the database hasn't changed like ever. So like everything lives in a VP post column, right? But this is also why it's very hard for them to kind of modernize without kind of like doing a breaking change and so on.
Because that WP post like content field, it could be a string of HTML. It could be a string of HTML built by the Elementor, page. It could be the Beaver Builder plugin. Is that still a thing? It could be Gutenberg. It could be so many different things, but it's a string of HTML, which some UI plugin knows what to do with, but because it might have JSON inside of an HTML comment that tells the front end what to do with it. And so that's incredibly difficult to get out of because that's such a bespoke thing. Something that we did cover actually, because it's also that's confounding, but also quite amazing in a way, because I know I wrote a how to migrate out of WordPress and into Sanity guide recently, and I was actually surprised that you can serialize over that HTML string and extract individual Gutenberg blocks. That's quite amazing that works. The hoops you've got to jump through to make it work are quite impressive as well. But yeah, it's not a portable format, because for somebody who's used Beaver Builder, what do you do with all of that content that's written into that HTML? Because what spec does it follow? So it makes just migrating out, unfortunately, is perhaps more difficult than it seems.
and you know, and you see how come the modern affordances of frameworks kind of have started aren't compatible, because take React components wants kind of pure data, right? They want attributes and values, and whenever we come to it with a HTML string, you either have to do kind of deserialization with the ATS kind of library or something, or you have to do the dangerously
set in
HTML. And you kind of lose the control that you were hoping to get with React in the first place. So the different efforts of making WordPress headless are also kind of constrained by what you get into the database. So yeah, it will be interesting to see where this goes. Yeah.
It's not impossible, but it is difficult, sadly. And I think it's good that you can extract the most of the data, because the REST API, again, is one of those confoundingly good, like the WP CLI. I'm not sure if you ever interacted with that much. It's amazing. It's an incredible thing. I think I've still got probably 30 odd WordPress installs sitting on a shared host somewhere, and I have a cron job that runs every single night to update all those plugins, because I wasn't just going to let them sit there. I'm pretty sure those websites are still up. So those sorts of things are quite remarkable. Because they're just ongoing old sites that don't need to be migrated out. But if they were production real things that of concern, then I would want them migrated out. But I suppose something I wanted to cover today too, if we're speaking to a primarily WordPress developer audience that doesn't yet necessarily fully grasp the whole landscape of other content management systems out there, I've already given a shorthand explanation of, I think Sanity is ACF plus custom post types. But is there what's the larger discussion about how to think about Sanity / other content management systems through the mind of a WordPress developer?
I guess there's a lot of assumptions that you have to look at again. I often find that take for example does Sanity do SEO? And I'm sure, but know this, that a lot of those things you also have to think about in the front end layer. So is it this decoupling I imagine that can be a little bit of a hoop that you have to kind of get your head around, and that you have to kind of set up the CMS, whatever it is, if it's Sanity or something else, you make sure you have the right data and the validation to make sure that the data is in there. And then front-end frameworks have slightly different but mostly kind of same-ish conventions when it comes to kind of applying meta tags and these kind of things. And of course, let's not kind of pretend that some stuff is kind of a little bit easier with WordPress. You can just install contact form 7 and have pretty much out of the box contact forms that you can pop into your templates and kind of get the responses and so on.
And that also have front end rendering.
Yeah, that is a little bit more of a little bit more engineering in this post WordPress world. But we also see here that we have libraries and so on that makes this easier or less hard. Forms are always hard, but yeah.
As a tangent, that's the number one plugin I don't know why somebody hasn't made for Sanity. I've said this so many times. Someone could be the gravity forms for Sanity. Will it be you? If I wasn't on the inside, I would be doing that by now. It's a wide open space.
But so we often talk about we have this composable word. So what the upside is, you can kind of pick and choose the services and so on that fits you and that you like, and you can connect them together. But that is also a little bit of a work and a little bit solution architecting on you. We have usual suspects and so on. Now, if you want to send email, something like resend is an obvious choice, probably, right? If you don't like resend, you can use Postmark or whatever, right? And so it can be a little bit harder also to reason about cost, because in WordPress and a lot of plugins are very it's site-based cost, right? Which is also interesting because we're almost in a post-site world. If you are big business, you have multiple domains and so on, and suddenly that cost is driven up. You have, but now it's more usage based, and it can be hard to predict like how much usage is something going to get. So there's a little bit of that kind of thinking you have to shift and kind of like try out.
Yeah, that's so. Sanity won't have any concerns on your front end. I think that's probably a big hurdle to get over too, is that, WordPress is very concerned with that front end. Like, it's extremely concerned with what the content's going to look like, Sanity and other headless CMSs won't do that. So you can install something in there are plugins for Sanity, you could install them, but your front end won't know until you make it aware of it. And like you were saying, can Sanity do SEO? It's something I've said to so many people trying out Sanity for the first time. The answer is always yes. If you ask me, can Sanity do this? I'm going to say yes, because you can. But then it's a question of like, how much time do you want to spend on it? Like, you could set up an SEO object that has a title and a description and validates the length of those. You could set it up in 60 seconds. Copilot will probably do that for you. Cursor or ChatGPT will give you that schema and you'll be done. So you didn't need to install a plugin. It was very simple to do that yourself. But any plugin that you're used to in WordPress that will have back-end and front-end concerns, like form plugins are a great example of that. You can set up one side of that in Sanity. You'll need to set the other side up in the front-end framework. That's kind of the trade-off that we've all moving to headless architectures. But then, as you say, there's cow paths trod for those of which email provider to use, which hosting provider to use. There's a few select examples that you will have a good time with.
Yeah, and there's loads of things you don't have to think about. It's like if you have like a out of the box WordPress install on DigitalOcean or something, and it suddenly gets popular, you will have the white screen of death at some point because you forgot to install the caching plugin and so on. And
caching plugins, multiple
plugins.
You haven't got object caching for the database. You haven't got like front end caching. You haven't got Cloudflare on. Yeah,
and like caching is a whole thing, but like that's mostly solved for you in this like modern web stack. Like we offer caching for all the data queries and asset queries, and then often where you host your front end, that will be cached two in different ways. So it's kind of like, and you don't have to worry about the PHP version on the server or all of those security things. At least not in the same way.
I'm starting to realize how many things I've forgotten about my time with WordPress. having to keep server software updated.
Yeah, and since everything is more oriented around kind of like atomic deploys and so on, you don't have to worry about some client suddenly upgrading a plugin and then the whole thing crashes because you had some assumptions that the plugin can like left out or something. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, your users shouldn't be able to bring down your Sanity Studio. Like the editing interface will always stay up because you're in control of that interface.
And also, if they manage to bring down the Sanity Studio, they wouldn't bring down the website because it's decoupled, and it kind of like, so there's less, like the risk is kind of like delegated a little bit more.
Yes, I should never assume that users can't crash something that shouldn't be crashable. So that's on me. Prove me wrong. But yes, is there anything else I think we should cover? Like, I didn't think we had to go for too long, and we can sort of close with resources, I think, because there's a number of things we can point people towards. But I think we sort of covered top to bottom that. Is there anything else we left on the table?
I guess it's like replatforming, like for most organizations, it feels like this risky project and potentially like scope creep, and like it is kind of like a huge deal. And I wonder, like for agencies and orgs that kind of feel they probably felt this a little bit looming for the last 5 years already, but now there's like this moment where that creates a little bit of urgency, maybe. What should I think about? Like, can you how do you do replatforming and de-risk it? It's maybe something we could kind of touch on a little bit.
Yeah. Actually, it reminds me, and I'll show it in a moment, like the migration courses that we've written, but it presents a great opportunity. Again, sort of getting back to that thought of, just migrate. Actually, it would be, you'd have a really bad time, whatever content management system you chose, if you just tried to get all of your content out of WordPress as is and just brute force that into something else. That we've seen people do migrations like that into Sanity. It's never a good time. It works because the answer is always yes. You can make it work, but it's not the best use of your time and resources to take this opportunity to consider, well, this is how things are in WordPress. How could they be in a different system? And to try and model content for what it is instead of what it looks like. A lot of things we talk about with structured content as data. Those are the challenges that we really want to see people take on. If you're going to go to the effort of replatforming, treat it as an opportunity to fix the mistakes of the past rather than just recreate them in a more modern stack.
Yeah, and the goal should be that you should be able to move faster after the replatforming, both from like web development standpoint, but also like from a content publishing standpoint and maintenance standpoint, and like never do that. Oh, we're gonna just do the whole like website in once, work for 2, 3, 6 months, and then make a big splash. Do it kind of like find out like how you can do it incrementally. You can start. You can install Sanity or something else today. You can start to kind of like map out a part of your web experience and get the feel for it, and then kind of like slowly replace the whole thing. Because like there's a lot of like change management things going on here, both in terms of the skills of your dev team, the mental models of your content team, and how to think about it, and as you say, like all kind of grasping all the opportunities that comes with a replatforming project as well. So it's not just like a chore, but it's actually something that can kind of like do great things for your team and business or whatever it is.
Yeah, you actually touched on a point there that we touch on in the migration details as well, is that you might think WordPress is outdated and you might not like it, but there's authors who, if you've got a content creator who's using it every day, they know it's janky, but it's reliable. Like it's familiar. It's janky in a familiar way. And so if you just like shove something new in their face, hey, look, I found this new thing called Sanity. It's great. You've got to use it. They'll likely hate it on the first day because it's so different. So yeah, making sure you get everybody together on the same page as to why this migration has to happen. And it's not a panicked decision, but it's also that it represents a great opportunity to move out, I think is really key as well. There is a good question there I see coming in the chat. I didn't realize we had those questions coming in, but wondering if it's possible to use AI to migrate content from WordPress to CMS using web scraping. Actually had this discussion internally this week as well. Somebody mentioned it as an idea that you could absolutely feed API responses or the results of web scraping to AI, and then if you told it this is my Sanity schema, it would ideally be able to, depending on the quality of your model that you've chosen, it should be able to extract that content and put it into a way that your Sanity schema represents. So definitely I could see use cases like that for migrations as well.
Yeah, for sure. And AI can also help you think about your content model, right? Like it reasonably understands the concepts of structured content. So you can say like, hey, we are this business, we are this kind of team setup, this is our site. Can you help me kind of like turn this into a reasonable departure for a content model? And then you can also do kind of like down the road, kind of like how can we map this data dump into these entities and so on.
Right.
But like the proof is in the eating of the pudding. I haven't seen anyone actually do this very structured yet, but I have no doubt that we will see that pretty soon, right?
Yes. It's one of the many promises of AI. That sounds absolutely reasonable that should work. But then, like, how many prompts will that take to get it exactly the way you want it? That's up to you.
But here's like the consultant in me that also like it's not just a chore. This is also an opportunity for you as a team to kind of like think loudly about what you do. What is the value? What are the work streams and so on? So like replatforming is also an opportunity to kind of like think about those things. And AI can be helpful, but like at the end of the day, it's also about the people who are actually doing this work and kind of like making this common language around things. So don't underestimate the effect of that as well.
Yeah, optimize for the best outcomes at the end of for everybody. Don't optimize for like how fast can we do this, or like how technologically clever can we do this as well. So, but yes, I mean, if you want to know more, that's where we do our call to action here. If you want to know more, there's a whole set of courses on Sanity Learn about getting from the system you're in to another system. And there's a few like generalized guides. The first course here is sort of that conversation with your team that you should have. Like it's the very human part. I feel like often I give technical advice on behalf of Sanity, and then sometimes it's very like interpersonal relationship advice. You should get the right people together in the room at the right time. So that's a really important guide just to get everybody on the same page. And then there's a guide sort of general principles about getting content migrated into Sanity, but then there is a very specific WordPress to Sanity, nuts and bolts. This is how you would do it, step-by-step guide. If you take on this course, I would love to know. And there's a feedback form at the bottom of every lesson when you're logged in, and that goes straight to my DMs. And I'm very, very keen to help people out with this one because it's a highly important thing at the moment, and I don't want to see anybody sort of tripping up or on anything. Just yesterday, received some feedback on one of the lessons. I went and added an extra two sections to this one lesson just to do about multi-site and deal with something else because every WordPress site, like we've said, is unique in some bizarre way. So you've got to think about every possible permutation of why that site's any different to any other. But we've got this guidance out there, which hopefully should prove useful for anybody who's interested in taking this further. But I think that wraps it up for now. So that's a good chat. I don't know where to go next because I don't like. Should we say, will this WordPress drama go away? The drama might go away, but that doesn't mean that the opportunity to look outside of WordPress is not a bad thing to stop and do as well. Because like we said at the beginning, we got to do that under no pressure at all. People under pressure are doing it now.
Yeah. It's tempting now. We're like beyond our kind of show notes, but like we can take some questions from the chat. But also like another thing that we haven't addressed and we can think loudly about is like WordPress.org, right? Mm-hmm. It's this like open source. You can host it on any traditional web server thing. You can even now. I saw efforts where we can host it serverlessly, and like I'm like what are they like? What aren't they telling us? Like, what are the downsides of that? I tried to deploy Craft CMS on Heroku before I quite understood how the internals worked, and got bitten in the butt because turns out Craft uses files as cache. So every once in a while, the whole cache was just flushed because the dyno was restarting, and there were performance issues, even though the developer experience was great, right? So, so there are kind of things like that. But it's open source hosted everywhere. That kind of creates some feeling of control for a lot of devs who are also like responsible for taking those decisions. And here we are as like a software as a service thing hosted. You put stuff, all your eggs in our cloud, and so on. It's like, how should one think about that kind of like assessment? It might be a question that people are wondering about.
Yeah. I know my personal take on this, and it's not shared with everybody, but I know working with WordPress, my least favorite thing in the world was having to handle the database and handle the assets. And so, like, I think that was as big a part as anything of what I liked about Sanity is that I never had to think about the database again. Never had to run another migration. Didn't have to think about assets. Did I FTP them all up? Did it generate images of the right size on the server? All those sorts of things. Making sure you had backups of those things. Not needing to really think about that. So I was very happy to abandon that and not have to think about it anymore. But this question of self-hosting does come up, and I find it interesting because someone's hosting it. Like it's not like it's your personal computer that's going to serve up the results of that database. So you are going to have to choose a provider at some point, whether you have access to dump that database at any time or not. So you are going to have to put your trust in the hands of someone. With Sanity, that's a proprietary database technology. With other providers, that's something else. But there is some amount of trade-off. It's kind of like the cloud is somebody else's computer. Like self-hosting is still somebody else's computer too. Like, but perhaps you feel more in control with that. That's entirely up to you.
Yeah, and I think it's also kind of like what type of control are you looking for, and what are you trying to avoid? So I have great empathy for I want to kind of like have control of the SQL database, because I've experienced putting something in some hosted database thing or something, or CMS, and when we needed to get out, it was really hard to get it out. Like the aforementioned Craft CMS. Doing migrations from one Craft CMS installation to another was very hard. And I was like, okay, I know SQL, I know databases, I can do this, but like the way everything was stored in a database made it very not portable.
Yeah.
So like having SQL databases doesn't mean that what's in it is very portable, right?
Yeah.
So when I kind of like had to make this assessment for clients and so on with Sanity, it's like, Sanity, like I have no control of the backend. That's fully hosted. I can make feature requests and so on. But at any point in time, I can dump all of these JSON documents with all of my content
and all the assets.
And since it's structured, it's pretty easy to transform that into a Flutter thing or whatever, wherever I need to go. So that isn't the risk. Like the content is mine. It's mine to export at any point in time. That's kind of the whole point with Sanity, to make that like very easy. And the format the data comes in is very easily portable, kind of. So that kind of like alleviated those worries, even if Sanity disappeared. So like the only lock-in in a way was like the editorial experience that I was able to offer. That kind of would suck if I had to kind of like redo that with those expectations, right? So, but that was an okay risk for me most of the times.
There's exceptionally few services that if they went away tomorrow, though, like you'd be just fine and just move on to something else. Like
it's kind of like and we're still here, and I think now we have big enough customers that like we won't disappear overnight. Not going to
but I mean, WordPress is now the example, because I know I've been in a lot of sales calls where it's WordPress doesn't have vendor lock-in, but then you see that it appears like one person can turn the whole community on its head. Like it's it may be like technically officially open source and available for everybody to do what they like, but then when you can take over the plugin in an instance, it makes you wonder how open and free and flexible it all is.
Yeah, and like the concept of open source, it feels like it rooms a lot of things, and it often comes with a lot of assumptions that might be more or less correct. It's like at the end of the day, you can always take this code and run it yourself, but what is the cost of that? Would you want to fork WordPress? Like
there's a lot of people asking that question at the moment.
But like what happens on 5 years down the road when you have like like every developer knows if you think about it. So just open source checkbox can't be the only thing you think about, or you have to think about what does that actually imply in this case. And this is what's devastating about this whole WordPress ordeal, because it used to be, well, at least if you looked at it from afar, you're like, it's good old reliable WordPress, right? And it has this amazing community. To be honest, like the WordPress community has been pretty rad. Learning this stuff, and then you have these kind of like pretty significant actors kind of like putting fire to it, kind of, and that's devastating. And I hope they like recover from this in a way, but like for us who are also running communities and so on, there's a lot of lessons to be had on how to do stuff or not to do stuff, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody on the outside of the WordPress side of the fence like who's hoping for the downfall of WordPress. Like I hope that community can recover to a stable position, but it's going to have people ask questions and look outside. And so ideally it can stabilize so people aren't stressed about what to do next. But definitely, there's never been a clearer signal that it's time to sort of broaden those skills. Definitely.
And I guess like maybe this is a good place to end. But also like for us that represents other web development communities, not just Sanity, but like you're a big fan of Remix. We're also coming to Next.js Conf next week.
Yeah, I'm also speaking at Next.js Conf next week.
Yeah, but like
it's the great thing about the front end community
too. And now if we have an influx of WordPress developers who will come with kind of like the stupid questions and so on, like be kind of like mindful, be kind of like helpful, and like show them that hey, there are like great places to learn also outside of the WordPress community. So this is also like a call to action for all of us to kind of like do better, I guess.
Yeah, that's an excellent call, definitely. All right. Well, on that, I think I tried to wrap it up 2 or 3 times, then we kept going. So this is good, though. I think that's like a natural
last episode of the Rings of Power. Like, it's not the end.
Hold on, wait a minute. You all thought I was finished. Hopefully this is the end of this drama, though. But I mean, this drama has surprised us all before. So maybe there's a version 2 of this. If there's anything we didn't cover, and like Knut said, if you've got one of those questions you feel like too afraid to ask, hit us up on X or LinkedIn or wherever you're watching this afterwards. And definitely join the Slack community as well. If you're a WordPress offboarder and need some assistance, the Slack community for Sanity is really excellent as well. So you should find some help there too.
Yeah. Finally get out of the loop.
Yes. I just have to. Okay. Yes. WordPress fun. Yeah. Excellent. All right.